Hi. So, I remember where I was on 9/11 when the first tower, I think, had fallen. And I was sitting at home with my newborn son, who was barely 72 hours old. And I was wondering why there was a TV that had been set up in the co-housing building of my co-housing community in the main shared commons. And I remember walking over, waddling over, 72 hours post-labor with my little teeny tiny baby in my arms. And I knew as the information came in and I understood what was happening, I just understood that the world had changed. And sure enough, before that, your whole family would go to the airport and go all the way to the gate and stand there and hang out, and then you'd walk on the little plane. Everyone would wave at you and they'd all leave again. And now there's these giant security lines, which at the time actually were, I think, normative in places like Europe and stuff, but we didn't have them here yet. So the world changed in a number of ways, many, many ways. And so yesterday I was sitting at work and I needed to check email because I can't remember exactly why. It has something related to Gusto, which is like this new system of how you get paid or something when you're an employee in the modern world. And I had one coming through and there was something I was supposed to sign up for, and I just clicked on my email, and at the very top of my email feed was an announcement by John Leakey, who works with Peter McCullough, and they have a Substack called, I think it's Focal Points. And the headline just said, Charlie Kirk has been shot and died, something like that. So I didn't get that moment that some people got where you're hoping he's going to recover. I learned of it, and you're hoping you read it wrong. And then just the tragedy. And here I am. I had to compartmentalize immediately because I'm at work. I've got another 3 hours of work. And so I'm stunned, and then I'm compartmentalizing, and then I couldn't do any processing. I just had to, get back to work. Work is very good. I like my job a lot, and it's very focused and requires all your brain cells. So what I want to say today is that what human beings exist as a species today. We have survived because we have an instinct to respond to threat and loss and tragedy and all that. We don't simply stop and emotionally process in the moment, because here's my example. If a lion comes running through your village and, bites a couple of people and drags a child off into the dark in the middle of the night, and the kid's screaming and it's going to get eaten alive, you do not, you're the Bushman of the Kalahari Desert, let's say, and it's 35,000 years ago, you don't sit there and go, oh, this is so sad, the baby died, let's all sit around and be really, really sad about this. Instead, you instantly grab all the surviving children. If someone might be running after the sounds of the screaming child in the dark, maybe, so you might respond by trying to get the child back. But you're also going to grab all the surviving children. You're going to come together next to the fire. You're going to get your weapons out. You're going to turn around and try to figure out how you're going to keep yourself alive when lion number 2 that might be about to burst upon the village, shows up. How are you going to prevent your second child from being dragged off into the dark? So in a moment where you feel like you want to fully honor the tragedy by giving complete attention to the pain of the loss. But also, we survive because we have an instinct to also want to respond. And we want to respond by understanding what happens. It's all about, what would you call it? It's all about basically further injury prevention. It's like you're scrambling, okay, wait, what's going on here? So like, who's the perpetrator? How do you stop them from killing another person in the next 10 minutes or 3 hours or next week at the next political event where someone that they disagree with decides to stand up in America and speak to an open crowd about their political viewpoint? We cannot function if the truly thousands of American citizens who serve our nation in a political function. We have attorney generals, we have governors, we have senators of all the different states, we have city council members of all of the big cities, we have police officers, we have judges, we have all of these people who are paid with our tax dollars to serve us. And then we have all the people who want to get elected into those positions because they want the opportunity to do good in our nation as they see it. And they're out there on the campaign trail. I remember when Barack Obama was elected as president, I'm pretty sure when he came out onto the stage with his wife and his 2 daughters, that there was like this big, giant, plexiglass type of concept thing in front of him. So he walked up to a speaker and a podium with this giant, probably bulletproof glass thing. And on the other side was this massive audience in the middle of the stadium who were all cheering and they were very excited. And I think it panned to like Oprah Winfrey watching how happy she was and so on and so forth. So I don't know if people who haven't had the opportunity to travel to, I think it's Williamsburg. There's Williamsport and Williamsburg in Pennsylvania. One of them is where my boyfriend, his family was from. And the other one is where it's sort of like the nation's first capital existed. And they have this big town area that's been preserved, and you've got buildings that that I think Jefferson or Adams or whatever these people like lived in, and they've got it's like it's not a theme park, but it's a historical preserved town, and they have stores that sell old-fashioned candy, and they've got the wig makers, and they've got the paper makers and all this stuff, right? Well, Jefferson just walked around. President Trump, President Biden, President Obama, they're all driving around in bulletproof, missile-proof, practically nuclear bomb-proof vehicles, and they're surrounded by Secret Service and all this protection. That's not something that we needed at the beginning of our nation. And George Washington, after he, the Civil War was really interesting. You fought during certain seasons, and then there was times where you went back and you worked on the farm, went back and fought. But it was a very interesting number of years. Then he became our first president, and when he went home to the farm, he didn't have a Secret Service detail like they gave to Fauci, okay, like they give to all the sitting presidents. After they're no longer sitting presidents, they go off to be retired previous presidents. They're all constantly being protected. So we've been sliding into this problem, but this is we're at a critical point. We need to stop the slide 100% right now, and we must regain the safety of the commons. The irony is that this is something that every single American citizen who loves Bernie Sanders and thinks Elizabeth Warren is great and loves AOC and wants to see Gavin Newsom as the next president, if you like those people, you want the safety of the commons too. You want AOC to be able to go walking down the street of her own hometown. You want her to be able to visit her mother or her siblings or her friends and not be worried that by doing so, they're going to get shot in a coffee shop or a restaurant. People, it's the United States of America. We want our politicians, our civil servants, to be able to walk freely and safely in their own nation as they serve us. And we want them on the campaign trail. And we want them walking around kissing babies and shaking people's hands. We want them at college campuses and at business events and at parades and at, a hospital, okay, meeting with children who have cancer while they talk about, a new, health policy that's going to, prevent the types of chronic injury that lead to cancer, right? We want ourselves and our children to be able to speak freely. You send your kid to a university, if that university has become a place where there's like a litmus test, there's a list of opinions you must hold in order to be safe at this university. And if you have one wrong opinion, then someone's going to beat you up. They're going to trash your dorm room. They're going to kill you, okay? The chilling effect of Charlie Kirk's assassination. Imagine being a parent and saying to your child, honey, don't get involved in the Democratic Students Union at your college, because if you express a political opinion, then someone who disagrees with you, they might shoot you and kill you in the cafeteria. So just shut your mouth, be quiet, and don't talk about politics. Oh, and don't talk about how you feel about the environment, because if you're not perfectly aligned with what the climate change radicals think, and you say something, well, they might see you as an enemy. Oh, and you better not talk about race, and you better not talk about gender, and you better not talk about feminism, actually. And you shouldn't talk about whether you think that marriage is useful or not useful as a construct. And you can't talk, well, I think you can't talk about religion, right? Pretty soon you can't talk about economic policy. You shouldn't be talking about China or Ukraine. I mean, if you have to make sure that you train your child. If you're going to go to this university, let's figure out in advance, hi university, you need to provide us with a document that explains to us what are the expectations on your campus. Are we pro-Russia, pro-Ukraine? Are we pro-peace, or do we have to be pro-war against certain people? Do we have to support Israel, hate Israel? If I buy clothing from a company that someone finds out it's owned by a Jewish person, is my child going to be beaten up? Will their car be vandalized? That's not America at all. How will we conduct democracy, representative, constitutional republic, democracy, whatever? How will we conduct our self-governance if it's not safe to express your promises and your platform and your campaign goals to your fellow American citizens? How will we conduct this if everyone's hiding? It's this week, a number of people on all sides, all parts of the spectrum of the political world right now, they're canceling their public events that were coming up over the next couple of weeks. There is just like cancellations. Whoosh. If you are a liberal and you are against an oligarchy and you want everyday average Americans to be able to step up and bring their expertise as a doctor, as an electrician, as a farmer, and you want them to be able to bring their wisdom, their experience, their passion, their compassion, their love for America and fellow citizens to the role of a civil servant, are you literally, how's that going to happen if it's not safe for them to express themselves? Charlie Kirk was starting a fall tour of universities. He was gratefully anticipated by people who already agree with him, you could say. He was probably curiously anticipated and respected and looking forward to for people who are real Americans, the ones who like to see a lively debate, the ones who want to live in a country where 10 people can get up on a stage and have very different viewpoints about a very important topic, and everyone goes home alive, and there are no coffins needed in the back room. Okay? And they don't want people to have to wear a bulletproof vest, right? We don't want people to have to be hiding behind bulletproof glass in college campuses in order to speak. And he was going, and then there are the people who are like, maybe they've never really watched Charlie Kirk. They just decided they hate him because their friend hates him. Maybe they've seen a few little clips of what he said and they've decided that he's this demon who says mean, nasty things because their confirmation bias means that's all they see. Or maybe they've actually done what I've done and they've watched a lot of his debates and they're like, oh, I totally disagree with him on almost everything. But he's not using 5-letter words. He's not demeaning people. He doesn't use 4-letter words. He's not derogatory. He's straightforward and honest about his viewpoint. And so guess what? If you like debate, if you value debate, if you want to live in an America where debate is diplomacy at the local, at the domestic level. So we have diplomacy with foreign interests, right, with other countries. There's that form of diplomacy. But in our domestic world, debate is diplomacy at the citizen level here, okay? It's domestic diplomacy. I remember that great movie that has Denzel Washington is in it. He plays like a teacher in the South, and he's teaching at a black school, and he's a debate teacher, and he ends up getting some kids, and they end up getting permission for the first time ever, a team of young black Americans who are going to go to a university up north that's like an entirely white university, and they're going to stand on the same stage on the campus and have a debate. And you have a white team from the university, and you have or maybe it's a private high school, whatever, I think it's university, and then you have a black American team from the South, and it's this beautiful movie. That was our upward trajectory as a society. We are making it easier and safer and more prevalent for people to debate and to not be prevented from debate based upon prejudice, right? Whether it's racism or sexism or whatever it is. Charlie Kirk was like this pinnacle moment. He's like, I'm going to walk into universities where right now there's a lot of people, a lot of money, a lot of energy and effort is targeting the youth because they're full of energy. Their brains aren't fully formed. They don't have hardly any life experience that's real. You know, they've mostly had everything paid for by mom and dad, and they've figured out how to be children. When you turn 18, you have accomplished childhood. Yay, you are graduating from childhood. You are a baby adult. You walk into university where your family influences are now gone. You've left your hometown. You're in a completely new place. It's almost like a brainwashing 101 concept, you know. It's like the military concept of you break them down and build them up again. Well, the universities are like, we're gonna isolate them from everything they've known and put them in a situation where there's a completely new authority power structure. If they don't please the professors, they get failed out of a class. If they don't please the administration by using the language that's being required nowadays, they'll get kicked out of school. And then of course you have the effect, kids that come out of high school, they all understand clique culture. Now they go into a university. If you don't please the people around you, you're not going to find a new clique. And a lot of these kids are desperate to find new friends. That's what they're there for. And so they're in this super vulnerable situation and they're being targeted. People are like, hey, if we can catch them now and we can get them in their college years and train them up to think a certain way because they don't have enough life experience to realize that what we're telling them is slanted and skewed and biased, then we can churn them out of the college system, kick them out into the world as voters and thinkers and believers who align with what we want them to think. And when we look at the universities across the United States of America and other countries, but let's just stick to the USA, I think we're pretty much at like an 85 to 90% of them are grossly skewed towards far, 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 far left ideological viewpoints. That there's some studies of some of these universities that have gone from back in the 50s, maybe it was a 50-50 split on professors being like Republican or Democrat, liberal or conservative. And now it's like 95 to 98% of them are registered Democrats. That's basically not really a university. It's now a conditioning environment. And yet it's been kept quiet. So you send your children there having trust and confidence, and you raise your kids to believe that if they go there, they can believe what they're told. They walk in with they've been told by everyone that they're walking into an environment where they can believe what they hear, and they don't have to go double check it. They don't have to question it. They don't have to wonder whether it's accurate, right? They don't have to suss it out themselves. So in every way, these college students are vulnerable, they're targeted, they're being manipulated. And Charlie Kirk, I think he saw that. And he's like, and then he realizes what I do. This leads me to my action. I live on this island. I know plenty of people who are conservative on this island. They're all keeping their mouths shut. So let's say, I think we probably have like maybe we're like a 60-40. 60% of islanders lean left. 40%, let's say, lean right on my island. But almost everybody who leans right is being quiet. Because at some point a few years ago, the people who leaned left got very artistic, and they got very loud, and they got very shouty. We've got different groups on the island. They do a lot of publicly visible activism. And so when they're being loud and then people around are clapping and cheering for them, anyone who's like looking around thinking, well, I don't agree with that, or I'm not clapping and cheering, they're going to realize that if they're like, oh, wait, if I say something, then all of these people who are clapping, they might get mad at me. So you get that bystander suppression effect. So if we had a 60-40 split on the island right now, I'd say about 95% of those 40% that are right-leaning conservative thinking on various issues, they're absolutely silent. I'm one of the extremely small number of people on this island who actually speaks up and says anything off the litmus test. I speak out and I say things that are contrary to that dominant narrative. And so, but then I start meeting all these people, and that's how I know for a fact. People are like, I can't say anything. I'm a business owner. If I were to say anything, most of my clients would stop shopping here. I'd go out of business. And there's people who are like, I can't say anything. I'm an educator at the schools. I'd get fired in a heartbeat. And other people are like, I can't say anything because I don't want to lose my job. And my boss is just vitriolic and spews political, vitriol at work constantly. And is just so grotesquely insulting that if I were to ever mention how I actually voted or what I actually think, I'm sure I'd be fired within like seconds. I personally had a part-time job on the island. Someone on the island reached out to the person who was hiring me, and I had worked for that person for like 4 or 5 months. They were thrilled with my work. Everything was perfect. And then all of a sudden, after Trump got inaugurated in January, and the island just exploded, and the sort of like, the left-leaning people just were exploding, and someone communicated to my boss. They're like, hey, I'm pretty sure that, she voted for Trump. And I got a text message firing me and my housemate because we were both working for this woman. And it was like, I can't have someone in my house who would vote for the current administration. Don't ever come back to my home. Boom. Okay? This is what's actually happening. And I keep speaking. I wrote an article about what happened to me, and I published it in the Vashon Loop, and I was very careful to protect the identity of the person who fired me, but I was like, this happened. And, a bunch of people were like, yeah, well, I wouldn't want someone in my house either who, voted for Trump. It's like every time you walk in the grocery store, you're surrounded by people who are giving you service. They're bagging your groceries, they're ringing you up, they're stocking the shelves, they're answering your questions politely when you're trying to find this or that, and they voted for Trump. And you walk through town, you get coffee made for you, you get tea, you buy clothing, you buy jewelry, you buy flowers. People voted for Trump, and they're making your life beautiful. They're providing you with service. They make your life so much better. And you're like clueless because they don't say anything about it. They don't have a sign up about it. Now, people who are left-leaning on this island, they feel safe putting up signs. Rainbow flag this, pro Kamala Harris, whatever that, blah, blah, blah. They can just open their mouth and in the middle of their work environment spew vitriol, knowing that no one's going to have the guts to challenge them. And the worst thing is bosses who do this. Like, what? How wrong to be a boss with power over your employees and then to abuse them by spewing vitriolic political attitudes in the work environment, and they all have to just pretend to agree or keep their mouth shut, right? And they're basically being harassed every day by you, but they can't say anything because you can fire them if they do. I mean, this all needs to stop. The most corrosive thing happening right now in the United States of America is the normalizing of violence towards people who have a different opinion than you politically. Corrosive on every level. Destructive to the core of our nation. Civilization ending. Boom. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out a way to create an opportunity for people who are being sidelined, who are silent bystanders on my island. I'm going to begin to create an opportunity for those people to come into a safe space where they can speak openly about how they feel, meet with other people, realize they're not alone, be protected from the really vicious people on this island who love to use anonymous on things like Facebook and just go in and be really grotesque and nasty. And I'm going to try to do for the, let's say, 30-year-old on up people, the same thing that Charlie Kirk did for young people in the universities, right? Young people throughout the country, regardless if they're in the universities. But specifically, he tried to help those university students, give them a voice, help them realize that it was okay to speak up and to have their own opinion and not have to pretend to have the popular opinion. And I want to do the same thing on my island. And I want other people to do it where they live. We have also people who, there are people who are assumed to be liberal, leaning, left leaning, opinionated, and they're not, but they're not going to correct that opinion because it keeps them safe. So it's like trying to pass, right? Imagine when, let's say about 150 years ago or 180 years ago, you'd have people who were like, they were born with really, really fair skin. They had blue eyes. They had, light brown hair, maybe a little bit of blonde, but their grandfather had been a slave. And if they could escape that family history, choose a different name, go off into the country, they could pretend that their heritage was all European, and then they would be legally safe and protected in like slave states, and they could pass as white and avoid the harm that was heaped upon people of African heritage because slavery was legal at the time. And so the concept of passing is one of, sometimes it's one of sheer survival, like in that situation. And now today, we have people who they keep their conservative or they keep their opinions and thoughts to themselves, and they just sort of are silent, or maybe they nod their head or they shrug, or, they might even lie, be like, oh yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. I agree. I'm going to go to the bathroom now, right? And they're passing as liberal left-leaning thinkers in a community like this so that they can avoid being fired and being harassed and being insulted and being defriended and being deplatformed and all of the above. And so what I want to say is that there's also people out there who they need a lifeline. They need someone to reach out a hand and say, here, grab my hand. I will pull you to the place where you can start to speak honestly your thoughts. And I'm going to put my arms around you. I'm going to keep you safe. You get to come over here. There's more of us over here. We're going to start to gather. We're going to, we're going to keep each other safe. And you get to start speaking honestly. So we have people who are actually conservatives who are being silent to avoid harassment. We have people who are perceived as being, they're almost trying to pass. But the reality is that if it was really safe on this island and in America today to just speak your truth and that people weren't going to freak out at you, what they would be saying would be different. And they need our help too. And this isn't about changing minds or opinions. The only thing this is about is liberating all of us from cancel culture, bully culture, death threat culture, so on and so forth. And that's what I'm hoping to do as a way of standing up and saying to Charlie, I'm going to pick up a little piece of your torch, a little ember of it, and I'm going to carry it forward.